Hi, I'm WTOP film critic Jason Fraley, and all month long, we are ranking my favorite movies in every genre. 30 genres over 30 days, and today we're breaking down one of my all-time favorite genres, the mystery movie. Now I know what you're thinking, what is the difference between mysteries and maybe thrillers that we have on this list? But really, if you go back and look at it, this was the one where thrillers, maybe we see Hitchcock shows us the bomb on the bus and we know something the audience doesn't. That's more of the suspense thriller. But what became mysteries is when we, like the audience, have no idea where it's going. So we are like the detective piecing together the clue, and that's why these movies qualified in mystery here instead of thriller. So this of course includes a bunch of Hollywood movies, new and old. We get Sidney Lumet's Murder on the Orient Express, which was the ultimate, murder mystery train. We've probably all done that in real life as something fun of who was the killer, but this is the ultimate movie, star-studded cast, had to put it on the list. We get movies like 1940's Rebecca, which was Hitchcock's first movie when he came over from London to Hollywood, won Best Picture with the creepy Mrs. Danvers, but I think it's a mystery because Joan Fontaine's trying to figure out why is Laurence Olivier, her new husband in this movie, why is he so obsessed with his late wife, Rebecca? Why is Mrs. Danvers so obsessed with Rebecca? It's pretty much a mystery based on that great novel. We also get In the Heat of the Night. Yes, this could have gone into the police dramas, but when I compared it against movies in the crime genre where we had all the other police genres, when I looked at like The French Connection, which had those, or let's say Training Day, it was different. Like when I thought about it, In the Heat of the Night was a mystery. It was really that Sidney Poitier trying to see who he goes around town trying to see who committed this murder. And of course, it has to make any list because of the big social progress that it represented. It's almost easy to overlook it in hindsight, but in 1967, they couldn't even shoot it in Sparta, Mississippi, where it was set. They had to shoot it in Sparta, Illinois. Norman Jewison decided to put it there because they were scared about the segregated South and how it would react shooting this in the 60s. But Sidney Poitier is, they call me Mr. Tibbs in the slap heard around the world. But at its heart, it's a mystery. Check it out. We also get movies like Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation, which he made in between the two Godfather movies. But Gene Hackman, as a guy doing surveillance, he thinks he overhears a murder plot, and he has to investigate it, kind of like Rear Window. But go back and check it out. It's the same character he would reprise later with Will Smith in Enemy of the State. The Conversation was the original. Blue Velvet, David Lynch. Now we're getting into really weird territory, but I have this in my top 5. I believe it's at number 4 because I think it's so well done if you go back and look at it. It's exposing the underbelly of suburbia, like a lot of the family dramas like The Ordinary Peoples and American Beauties we talked about. But at its heart, this is a mystery because the main character discovers an ear in the field, and he's like, all right, what? I need to go investigate. What is this? And I'm telling you, the plunge that he does is so disturbing. He comes across Isabella Rossellini, who's the daughter of Ingrid Bergman and Roberta Rossellini. Her as a singer in a blue-tinged, blue-lit nightclub, singing "She Wore Blue Velvet." It's so creepy, but of course, Dennis Hopper with the mask, inhaling that gas that makes him just one of the most evil. Baby wants blue velvet. It's one of the freakiest. We got to go to the next one. That freaks me out. Other mysteries. The Usual Suspects. Yes, again, we had to drop it a couple slots because of the Kevin Spacey stuff. But again, film's a collaborative medium, and the way this mystery unfolds with Kaiser Soze and, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. Finally, the ultimate revelation of who is Kaiser Soze. One of the great shocker endings ever. Put it in mystery. Memento, Christopher Nolan's breakthrough, writing it with Jonathan. Man, the way, it's crazy, like in hindsight, thinking of The Dark Knight and Inception and all the big movies he's made since, Dunkirk and all Interstellar, to go back and think like this little gritty mystery movie that moved backwards is what put him on the map. The gall of that, to show in black and white a movie that, it starts at the end and then it kind of moves backwards chronologically, but also the main character, Guy Pearce, he's amnesic. He has short-term memory loss. So as he's trying to solve his wife's murder, that's the mystery. Great mystery. As he's trying to solve it, he can't remember the clues, so he has to tattoo himself with clues. He has to take Polaroids to remember. And every day he wakes up starting over the mystery journey again. It's just one of the coolest movies ever. We get David Fincher's Zodiac, I think underrated. We get Prisoners, Denis Villeneuve's child abduction mystery, where Jake Gyllenhaal's trying to find the abducted daughters of Hugh Jackman, Maria Bello, Terrence Howard, and Viola Davis. Look at that cast, not to mention some of the prime suspects, Paul Dano and his, I think, adopted aunt, Melissa Leo, and then Jake Gyllenhaal's detective. Look at that cast. Unbelievable. I think it's underrated. And when Jake Gyllenhaal knocks on Melissa Leo's door for the first time, you're not going to know it on first viewing, but look at the car in the background. I promise it repays on repeat viewings. And Villeneuve, the director, went on to do Arrival and the new Blade Runner and Sicario, but it all started with Prisoners. And then, of course, Gone Girl. David Fincher, this mystery, again, I think maybe the last third got a little intense for some of y'all, but to me, Rosamund Pike should have won the Oscar that year. They gave a makeup award to someone else that year. It might have been the Julianne Moore year, I think, who should have won earlier. But man, Rosamund Pike, I would have given it to her. So creepy as the abducted, or the missing wife of Ben Affleck. She appears a lot in flashbacks here. We also get Neil Patrick Harris. A bunch of people in this movie, but man, in the way Fincher directs it, it's so good. But Rosamund Pike, the creepiest to me since Glenn Close and Fatal Attraction. Gone Girl, one of the best mysteries. Now, Gone Girl was a great Fincher Hollywood mystery, but there was another Fincher Hollywood mystery that I didn't think was as good as the foreign remake, or the original foreign that he remade, which was Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Now, I do like Fincher's version with the big female cover of Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song, and it opens with the cool opening graphics. But to me, the original is I think just a little bit better. If you, as good as Rooney Mara was, go back and look. The original was Noomi Rapace, who you'll recognize from Prometheus, which was the Alien prequel. Here she was really put on the map with the original of Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, one of the great mysteries. We also get The Vanishing. It had a pretty solid Hollywood remake with Sandra Bullock and Kiefer Sutherland and Jeff Bridges. But the original, I think it was called Sporeless is the original one. It's so much better, especially the ending. Check it out. The Vanishing. A young couple, the wife goes missing at a gas station on a road trip, and the rest of the movie is a mystery of what happened to her. We also get other great foreign flicks like Neil Jordan's The Crying Game. That has Forrest Whitaker, but man, if you haven't seen it, I don't even want to spoil anything. One of the most WTF twists of all time. Go watch The Crying Game. Great mystery. We also get a little more challenging Michael Antonioni, La Aventura, which was a 1960 movie. It was actually, some of the audience booed it at Cannes, and then it wound up winning too an award, a special award at Cannes too. So it was very divisive at its time, and I can see why too, because it's a mystery that has the guts to then not bother with solving the mystery. I mean, come on. A lot of let's say European filmmakers treat film in a little more artistic way. So Antonioni in this Italian masterpiece is not so much, he's almost subverting the Hollywood form, where in Hollywood it would be like, who is the mystery? What happened to this missing woman on this boat trip? But Antonioni's like, you know what, I'm going to use that as the setup, but the rest I'm going to use as to explore society and the relationships of these people who are looking for and how they fall for each other and what happens there, what that says about society. So again, it can be challenging, and full disclosure, I prefer when we solve the mystery. Personally, I'm not opposed to an ambiguous ending, but I at least like when they, like Zodiac, they don't solve it, but they at least give us something to work with. So, but I had to include it. It's an international gem of international cinema. Another Antonioni where we do get, I mean, this is more my vein, Blow Up. Again, it's ambiguous. This is, to me, it's the sweet spot though. We don't know who is the killer, but at least we get a little bit of closure. So in this, it's Blow Up, 1966, Antonioni. A lot of the Austin Powers, like the yeah baby, like that avant-garde photographer comes from Blow Up. The Omen as well, with the photographer who captures something on his screen. Yeah, I guess you could say that it comes from Rear Window, Hitchcock's, Jimmy Stewart's photographer. But Blow Up did a really cool thing where the actual photograph, he thinks he sees a murder at the park in the background of the photo of his photograph. He thinks he sees the killer, but is it actually a killer, or is it just an optical illusion where a tree looks like a face? If that's not intriguing you, I don't know what. It's a great mystery. And then Michael Haneke's Caché is another great one where this couple in Paris is getting sent videotapes. Someone is watching the outside of their row house and is sending them videotapes of it. Who has the axe to grind? Who is seeking revenge by sending these videotapes is the ultimate mystery, and I think it's my favorite Haneke movie. Of all of the movies he did, White Ribbon and Amour and Funny Game, all these movies, Caché is my favorite. Now, of all those great mysteries, the top 3 was a no-brainer for me. Number 3 is Hitchcock's Rear Window. We've already mentioned all the movies it influenced, from Caché to Blow Up to all these movies where someone thinks they've seen something, a murder maybe, and the rest of the movie is the mystery trying to figure it out. Now, you could have easily put it number 1 on this list, and I would have been fine. In fact, full disclosure, it was the movie that made me want to go do my master's in film, get my MFA, because I wrote a paper in undergrad on a Hitchcock class about the very thing, about how there's more than just the mystery here. Check out how Hitchcock uses Jimmy Stewart's lens. He's got a broken leg. He's in a wheelchair. He looks out the back of his Greenwich Village apartment, and he looks at all the windows, and he's cutting from window to window, and he thinks he sees the murder. Mrs. Thorwall suddenly is there one day, and after a bump in the night, she's gone the next day, and the blind is drawn. So what happened to Mrs. Thorwall? It's a mystery on the surface, and it's great Hitchcock suspense. Don't get me wrong. But what I think elevates it, it's all an allegory for the filmmaking process. So Jimmy Stewart's lens and his Rear Window, as he cuts from window to window, they're like the different shots in a movie and what the editor is showing us from shot to shot, and the things that are outside the frame. Like, look, if you go back and look at it, it's a treatise on filmmaking, and Hitchcock's all these apartments is sort of like the master's dollhouse. The moment we know that Hitchcock has us is when, imagine you're looking at 2 different windows. We have Mrs. Lonely Hearts down here. We think she's going to commit suicide because she's drinking wine alone and taking pills. And Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly are like, oh my God, we got to call the cops. And we, the audience, are so focused on Miss Lonely Hearts down here that if your eye looks up, you see Mr. Thorwall coming down the hall, and Grace Kelly has climbed in the window and is looking for clues. But Mr. Thorwall is coming, and it's like at that point we know Hitchcock has us. Spielberg said it's his favorite suspense movie. But you're looking at Miss Lonely Hearts, and then you happen to look up, and you're like, oh my God, he's gonna catch her. He's gonna catch Grace Kelly. It's just textbook stuff. Look at the whole opening is visual storytelling. Every neighbor represents a possible future for Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly. The answer, Jimmy Stewart is just so doesn't want to settle down in marriage, where Grace Kelly is there, literally the perfect potential wife who wants to marry him so bad. The answer, it's like almost like the answer is right in front of us under our noses so many times, but if we spend a little more time looking inward than outward, into other people's lives, if we just look what we have and how good we have it, Grace Kelly's there the whole time. And then it's only until she gets involved in the mystery and helps him solve the case that there's that moment where he looks at her and is like, oh wow, yeah, well, all right, Lisa, I like Lisa. But look the way every neighbor represents a future for Jimmy Stewart. There's the married couple that's bickering. There's, of course, the Thorwalds that ends in murder. There's the starving artist. There's the piano player who can't write the song because Jimmy Stewart's a photographer in the movie, and that's how he broke his leg. He got hit by a car while shooting a photograph at a race. But everything in the background, and watch how Hitchcock will circle and move about who's showing in the background based on what they're talking about even. It's unbelievable. So when Jimmy Stewart's like, yeah, I don't want to get married, the background is the ballerina, the single, social butterfly, the ultimate, living the life. And there's birds on the ceiling. That's Hitchcock viewed women as birds. I mean, that was probably his biggest flaw. Hence the birds, hence the stuffed birds in Psycho. But when Jimmy Stewart and Grace Kelly start talking about, when she's like, why don't you get married and settle down? The camera swings around, and it's the newlywed couple with the shade drawn behind them. It's literally, if you thought it was just the mystery, no. Go back and look what's in the background in every shot. Rear Window could be number 1, but it's my number 3. Number 2, Seven. David Fincher's Seven. Oh my God, this movie knocked me out. We get Morgan Freeman, and it's so dark too. It could easily be a noir, I guess, but I put it in mystery. Morgan Freeman is this aging detective. It's almost like No Country for Old Men. He's seen so much violence and he can't take it, and he wants to get out of it. And in the end, he even says, "I agree that." I think he quotes Hemingway that he says, the world is a beautiful place and it's worth fighting for. And he says, "I agree with the second part." It's so dark, it's so grisly. And he and his, the up-and-coming, hot-headed sidekick detective that's going to take over his job, Brad Pitt, in one of his earliest roles. He would go on to rework with, Fincher again in Fight Club. But it's that ultimate, old lion, young lion kind of dynamic. Morgan Freeman is well-read, and Brad Pitt's reading the cliff notes because he's this young, almost like millennial age in a way of, too overly stimulated. And of course, his wife, Gwyneth Paltrow at home, the first time we see her, we only see her head laying on the pillow. Think about that. She's creeped out the whole time in the whole movie. And then she's not wanting to be left alone. We have Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman trying to solve this case. They're paired together in Morgan's final case to find a killer that is killing people with the 7 deadly sins. It is the ultimate mystery. All these bodies are turning up with, some greedy man shows up with greed written in his apartment in his blood. Gluttony. The killer feeds him to death until his stomach bursts. Someone who's pride, someone that's really vain. They cut the nose to spite the face. Lust is the scariest one. Or sloth, the guy that's like shriveled up in his apartment with all the air fresheners because he's just forced to lay in bed. It's similar to what Saw would do later, but it took that into torture porn. 7 did it perfectly, where the killer's almost like, yeah, he's evil, but it's almost like he's teaching us something, and all these people were these sinful 7 deadly sin people, and he's like, that's the best movies when the killer or the villain is, yes, evil, but they're so complex where it's almost like you kind of get, even Thanos, you kind of get, they give a reason for why. Or Black Panther, you sort of not sympathize with them, but at least they give them some meat on the bones. And of course, the ultimate reveal here, it's not even in the credits, that Kevin Spacey is the killer. Again, why you can't put it in the top slot? It takes it away from me a little bit. But the fact that he's this evil killer preying on people, in a way, it kind of works in 7. And actually, if you want to look back at it, knowing that Gwyneth Paltrow was one of Weinstein's victims, and that Spacey was one of the perpetrators of some of what's been exposed here in Hollywood. And then you have Morgan Freeman, and then you have Brad Pitt as the young guy who almost punched out Weinstein at a thing to protect. In a weird way, it's in hindsight, it's this weird microcosm that was kind of foreshadowing all of it. What's in the box? Sometimes it's scarier than what we want to know, but man, Fincher just nails it with that Trent Reznor and the 9 Inch Nails score, the opening credits. You get me closer to God. It's so, man, 7 is a piece of work. I don't think Fincher ever topped it. Number 1, Hitchcock's Vertigo. I have a super personal connection to this movie because I've wanted to hold it up as the cream of Hitchcock's crop for a long time. Even before, I think I remember when I first watched the American Film Institute's top 100 countdown in like 1997. Vertigo was like around number 50 or 60 something, and Psycho was like in the top 10. Most lists did that because everyone was like, oh yeah, Psycho, masterpiece. And it is. I mean, we just talked about in the horror genre, all the symbolism. And the more I watched this movie, I was immediately thinking, I was like, this is his best work. There's so much going on here that's getting overlooked because, let's face it, it ends on a kind of a yank the rug out, tragic, almost like, wait, what moment, as Jimmy Stewart goes back out on the bell tower. It comes full circle. We feel the closure. But the first time you watch it, you're like, whoa. It doesn't leave you like, oh my God, Psycho, great twist, great movie, yay, Rear Window, oh great, North by Northwest, so much fun. It almost leaves you where like, wait, what? But I promise you haven't seen Vertigo until you've seen it again. All the critics at the time said it's just weird. There's awkward angles of like, Why is he showing the ceiling so much? It's poorly framed. No, dummies, you're not looking close enough. The idea is he's showing us, see, that shows you that even the elite critics don't understand. Oh, Hitchcock's mainstream. He's the master of suspense. He makes popcorn, thriller, entertainment rides. There's nothing more going on. You missed it, guys. And what movies are we missing now that are mainstream that have a lot going on? All right, I'm telling you, there's a reason we see the ceilings, okay? I'm not gonna go into any more than that, but once you see the movie, think about it. Think about the ceilings. We also see, I told you about, sort of the bell tower finale. That's foreshadowed the whole time. So that long series where Jimmy Stewart is following Madeline, Kim Novak, so Jimmy Stewart, just in case you haven't seen it, he's a retired detective who has vertigo, a fear of heights. Every time he's high, he looks down, he has acrophobia. He gets vertigo and he starts spinning. Hitchcock does this famous dolly zoom where he's zooming in and pulling and dialing back at the same time, where to create that sensation. We've seen Jaws and Goodfellas and even The Lion King with the wildebeest, Simba. We've seen that done a million times on a technical level. But as Jimmy Stewart's following Kim Novak, it's his husband. Kim Novak is the wife of an old college friend who he thinks is possessed by her grandmother's ghosts. So as he's following her around, there's this almost 30-minute silent sequences where he's following her around thinking she's possessed by Carlotta Valdez, the ghost of her grandmother who committed suicide at the same age and jumps in San Francisco Bay, all that stuff. So seriously, all the scenes where you're like, why is there no talking? You gotta look closer. There's the bell tower. Why are there low ceilings? There's a reason. There's greens and reds throughout the movies. Green is the immortal world, red is the mortal world. Look at, because they go to the Sequoia Park and they say, it means green, everlasting, ever living. Think about that in the light of, literally in the light when when Jimmy Stewart, he meets another girl later. No better portrait of lost love, but he meets Judy, played by Kim Novak, who he dresses up to look like his lost love of Madeline, with the same gray suit and the same blonde hair. And when she comes out of the room in that green light to that great swelling Bernard Herrmann score, it's the green light because the ever-living, the ghost of his old lost love is back. And most of all, in the end, I think every great movie is about something on the surface, but then something much, much deeper under the surface. And what's so cool about Vertigo to me is that literally the same one-word answer can be applied to both. So on the surface, you think it's a movie about possession, as in ghostly possession, because, he's investigating Madeline, who's possessed by her grandmother, Carlotta Valdez. But while it's about possession, ghostly possession on the surface, underneath it's actually thematically about possession, a different kind of possession, as in the male gaze, Me Too, male possession of women. He's trying to recreate his ex-lover through the new one, through all this stuff we mentioned, but also because if you think about it, there's a key line that's mentioned throughout the movie. Gavin Elster, first of all, the husband who's having his wife killed, says, back in the old days of San Francisco, men could get away with that, back when they had the money and the power and the freedom. Later at Argassi's bookshop, when Jimmy Stewart and Midge are investigating the mystery, the bookshop owner also is talking about the history of San Francisco, and he says men could do that back then when they had the power and the freedom. He threw away Carlotta, and that's why she killed herself. That's the second reference. So that should start cluing you in as viewers. You're like, okay, this is the theme. All right, where are we going? And in the end, in the final finale and the climax, Jimmy Stewart himself says it again. He says, then what did you do? Oh yeah, back when and then what happened? Oh, Elster, like when he had the power and the freedom. It's mentioned 3 times because I think that is the message. I honestly think it's a message. Yeah, you could say it's Hitchcock's own flaw and his own fetish, but you'd like to think that through a lens, we're almost, as artists, we're putting our own selves out there, even our own flaws and frailties and insecurities. I think it's best on display in Vertigo. And that is why I always said it should be way higher on the AFI list. And what do you know? When they redid the list, they put it in their top 10, way after TOP had said it was his best. And then what? Oh, wait a minute. And then after that, Sight and Sound magazine polled international critics. And this is even a more arty list than the AFI list. This is world movies. Vertigo unseated Citizen Kane for the first time ever as the greatest international critics pick of the greatest movie of all time. I think we were ahead of the curve. Please go watch it. And you haven't seen Vertigo until you've seen it again, because it takes knowing the end of the mystery before you can see all of the symbolic breadcrumbs, the reds and the greens. Check it out. Vertigo, the greatest mystery of all time. See my full top 25 mystery movies on WTOP.com's entertainment page. Join the blog and tell us what you think. And definitely tune in tomorrow as we break down my top 25 politics in media movies, which of course means a lot to us here at WTOP. In a newsroom, lots of journalism favorites on this one.